Okay, it has started.
Hi, everybody. Just gonna give it a minute to let people file into the webinar, and then we will begin shortly. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at our next installment of the BES-Net TT webinar. And today we have for you, first of all, Ms. Celeste Chariandi, who will be talking about insights into the strategy employed by BES-Net TT Project Team in public awareness and education activities. And there will be a special focus on the development of hands-on activities developed for the use in formal and informal education settings. And in addition to that, we have for you Mr. Shane Bala, who will be talking about another installment of his plans for pollinators. So without further ado, let me introduce once again Celeste. Ms. Celeste Chariandi is the Science Communications Officer for the BES-Net TT project. She has worked in the science communications field for over 2 decades, and her qualifications are in zoology, plant science, and science communication and communication studies. You guys are by now, I'm sure, very familiar with the BES-Net TT project itself, so I don't have to tell you much about that, except that we are continuously working to improve the science, policy, and practice for pollination and pollinators. So I would like to hand over to Celeste to get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lena. And I am going to share my screen now so that we can start the presentation.
Hello everyone. Thank you for tuning into this webinar. It focuses on communication for public awareness and education in the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Network Trinidad and Tobago project, or the BES-Net TT project. As stated in the project document, the BES-Net TT project seeks to address the science, policy, and practice of pollination and pollinator management in Trinidad and Tobago. It notes that issues facing pollinators locally stem from a lack of public awareness and a lack of pollinator appropriate management. A key outcome of the project is the provision of education tools and support to improve the practice and application of pollinator and pollination science in multiple contexts. The project therefore has a communication plan which identifies a range of audiences with which it targets specific messages to build an appreciation and awareness of pollinators, and which encourages public participation in pollinator management. The audiences include farmers, local government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and students. A few points on communication planning. From my experience, I would say that project communication, particularly in science-based projects, has grown in breadth and depth over time, as project managers and implementing agencies have recognized that communication is not a one-size-fits-all undertaking. Good communication meets people where they are and recognizes their interests and needs and peculiar differences. Communication is also recognized as a two-way street, so that as much as the project team has to share, it should also be prepared to receive feedback, which in turn advises improved communication and capture of those special nuggets that often arise from the audience. This it attempts to do using varied communication products and pathways. We currently utilize platforms such as webinars, workshops, a newsletter, a Facebook page, and other social media accounts, and outreach in public communication. In this webinar, however, we take a focus on the development of prototypes for some hands-on communication products that are being used in communication at outreach activities. By developing these products as the project is being implemented, the project is essentially able to test these products in the field so that they can be improved and eventually captured in a suite of products that can be used in public communication even when the project has concluded. So where do we start? The content of any of the communication used in the project's public knowledge building exercises includes basic introductions and information on pollination and pollinators, which does not assume prior knowledge. This allows persons with no background or little background on the subject to get an introduction. And for those who have some prior knowledge, they can get a recap and an opportunity to build on their existing knowledge base. In most cases, the starting material used for development of these resources is the suite of formal education curricula for various subjects used in our nation's schools. These documents outline some key concepts which are to be imparted to students, as well as the types of learning outcomes that are expected. The BES-Net TT project includes among these outcomes the type of behavior or actions towards which it wishes to guide users of the resources. A BES-Net TT communication working group has meticulously examined curriculum documents to identify key entry points in these curricula for which it can provide information for student uptake and then add a little something extra to bring awareness, improve attitudes, and solicit a call to action. So how do we get and structure this content? The information is built after gathering from sources such as peer-reviewed publications, experts, and reputable websites to ensure that the information is credible. Consideration is given to the educational level of the audience in choice of vocabulary, use of examples, and depth of explanations needed to clarify the information that is to be shared. While effort is exercised to make the content as brief as possible and to simplify language, care is taken to maintain the correctness of content through internal reviews before the final versions are produced. This checks the standard 5 C's of communication: clear, concise, correct, credible, and comprehensive. Of course, our hope is also that the way in which the information is presented will influence positive uptake and sharing, or contagion. So why do we go hands-on? We may be accustomed to the use of posters, brochures, and video resources in communication, both in past and present projects. Each product is useful in being able to supply information and allow review, playback, and referencing by the user. While still a standard means of communication, these products, however, may not allow for questioning, feedback, and interactions that can enable probing, provide more information, or spark and secure deeper understanding. Hands-on materials, in contrast, allow a greater opportunity for interactive learning with a stronger engagement of the individual or group. Hands-on materials sometimes require the presence of a personal guide, but others are self-guided. In the former scenario, when a guide is present, the materials can also serve as icebreakers and non-intimidatory conversation starters, especially when introducing non-scientists to science-based themes or content. Howard Gardner, a developmental psychologist, offered the theory of multiple intelligences as an expansion of the concept of intelligence originally considered to be a bilayer of mathematical and linguistic ability. According to Gardner, an individual possesses 7 intelligences: visual spatial, verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, bodily kinesthetic, musical rhythmical, interpersonal, and intrapersonal, each to differing degrees, which create unique opportunities and mechanisms for learning. If we accept the concept of multiple intelligences in our communication effort, it is necessary to create opportunities for different persons to engage with the content of our communication, individually or in a group, on various levels, as they see, touch, hear, and think. The activation of the senses in this engagement facilitates absorption of the content as it excites, stimulates, and provokes thought, enabling deeper understanding and impressionability of the experience on the individual. Bringing the fun element. While the content must be scientifically sound and validated, we add a bit of fun. Enjoyment is an important factor since interest in an activity must first be established before the activity can be understood. The design of the materials, therefore, can take into consideration some elements of play, whether it is an individual or a group engaging with the material. What I like to call the hook, line, and sinker approach to design is very much considered in the development of the materials. The hook being what attracts the user and sparks curiosity. Here it could be the actual items used, their attractive colors, or unusual use of raw materials. The line is made up of the elements that draw the user in and keep attention focused on engaging with the materials and making sense of or understanding the information being shared. Lastly, the sinker refers to the aspects of the engagement that stay with the user, including the content itself, the learning or the knowledge gained. Making it engaging. So A number of different engagement strategies have been considered, and as previously alluded to, the materials can often be used with a single user or can be modified for use in groups. It will be best to explain this by referencing some of the materials that are already in use. The process of pollination and fertilization. This is a simple guided activity that uses the elements of a matching game or puzzle, and the resource in this case was not developed by the project, but was adopted for use from reapinfo.org. A very useful yet simple activity which helps the user to understand the process of pollination and be clear that it is a different process to fertilization which follows. This has been used as an icebreaker exercise and a classroom activity, with short statements describing each step and images which match what is described in the statement. A user can put together the sequence of images to follow and learn about these processes. The activity was downloaded and copies were printed and laminated so that it was able to be used in groups of students within a class setting. This was used to clarify the pollination process with primary school students and can be used with secondary level students to clarify the difference between pollination and fertilization, which is an actual examination question on past CSEC biology papers. Form and function. Matching flowers to their pollinator type. This activity uses two specially made dice using simple color printouts of some more commonly known flowers of different shapes, colors, and sizes, and printouts of icons representing different animals that act as pollinators. And for good measure, we've added one twist, an icon representing the wind. Also included is a sheet that gives guidance on the types of pollinators that are attracted to and pollinate certain types of flowers. This activity can be self-guided if the user can read, but it can also be used with the help of a guide who first explains that shape, color, and sometimes scent are influential on the type of pollinator that visits a flower. After this introduction, the user tries to determine the type of pollinator on one die that is the main pollinator of each flower given on the second die. This activity was used at outreach booths and with students. Students were organized into two teams using the activity as a game with points awarded for correct answers. The responses given when the die with the flowers is rolled also provide opportunities for debate. For instance, one flower can perhaps be pollinated by multiple pollinator organisms. And also for new learning, for instance, not all flower visitors pollinate. Example, those that rob nectar from the flower without pollinating. On outreach sessions, users express surprise about the range of organisms that are pollinators, as well as the crops they pollinate, such as bats being pollinators of bananas. As the project is encouraging the development of pollinator gardens, the activity is also used to guide users on plant selection to attract the pollinator types. Pollinator math. This activity engages learners in a group session. Some individuals are given the role of pollinators, and others take on the role of flowers on a crop plant. The activity uses laminated, flower-shaped Bristol board pieces, which the crop plant actors wear on their fingers, while the pollinators are equipped with washable markers so that they can record their visit to a flower by placing a unique mark. In trying to mimic reality, the persons bearing flowers are lined up in rows, and the pollinators are encouraged to visit the flowers one by one over a set period of time. The math component involves counting how many visits each pollinator makes in the time period, and then working out an average value per pollinator. The exercise is repeated for a scenario representing post-pesticide application, and the number of pollinators is reduced. One version of play starts with two different types of pollinators, so that one pollinator type can be eliminated in the repeat run. The same types of calculations are done, and then questions are posed about any changes seen in the results, and explanations for changes can then be discussed. The exercise therefore provides a starting point for discussions on the effect of broad-spectrum pesticides used on farms, natural pest control options, and the practice of integrated pest management or IPM methods. iNaturalist. iNaturalist is an online platform which assists users in the identification of living organisms. The BES-Net TT project is promoting the platform by encouraging users to upload images of organisms visiting flowers to the platform and to tag these contributions under a Pollinators and Pests of Trinidad and Tobago project, which is hosted on the platform. This call to action enables the project to grow a database of pollinators found in these islands through the efforts of citizens. Guidance sessions on the use of iNaturalist have been hosted at a monthly project webinar, a macro photography workshop, and at a webinar held earlier this year for a secondary school group. A webinar on its use can also be found on the BES-Net TT Project's YouTube channel. The project will offer guidance sessions to schools that are interested in engaging their students in this activity. The project team is promoting the use of the platform by secondary school students in a variety of ways for school-based assessments or SBAs and internal assessment IA exercises. How scientists conduct field research. Demonstration of field equipment. In order to bring the idea of field research closer to the public and to enable their understanding of what scientists are doing when they go to the field, the BES-Net TT team showcased some of the equipment used in field research on its public outreach exercises. As far as possible, the equipment setup was demonstrated, and samples of organisms that are being investigated were safely exhibited. This was done while also underscoring the importance of seeking approvals for research and safety in fieldwork. These types of exercises serve to promote the relevance of scientific research and to demystify the research process. Each project research activity that is currently underway incorporates a component of community or public participation or demonstration or training exercises. Students of one primary school benefited from an equipment display, as did participants in a bat pollinator workshop. Students on campus at one of our universities will soon be exposed to research techniques used in investigation of seagrass pollinators. And environmental agencies and various NGOs have been invited to a training workshop at which they will be guided on the use of sampling equipment that will be used in a bee survey exercise. The BES-Net TT team is very open to sharing some of the hands-on resources which have been developed and which are under development for public awareness and education activities. Interested persons or groups can contact the project team at besnet.tt@gmail.com. If your organization would like to expose your group or students to these resources. We are very much interested in building a culture of citizen science as we put forward these efforts in pollinator valuing, conservation, and management. Please note our references for this presentation. This can be captured in the webinar recording. Many thanks for your attention and participation in this session. We look forward to your continued interest and support.
Thank you very much, Celeste, for that great presentation. So as usual, if you have any questions, you can type it into the Q&A or you can use the chat. So I think we can take questions for Celeste now, if there are any. So please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A for this purpose. Nothing so far? Well, I will give you all some more time to think about it. We can go ahead and let Shane present, and we will take questions for both Shane and Celeste at the end of the session. So
Sure.
please, again, use the Q&A, or you can use the chat for questions or comments that we can address about Celeste and then also Shane's presentation. Okay, so let's move on. Next up is Mr. Shane Bala, who is the project manager for the BES-Net TT project. And Shane, would you like to go ahead? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, we
Yes.
are.
All right, great. All right, welcome everyone again. So we're up to part 4 in the series. For those of you who didn't catch the earlier ones, these are still available online, so you can have a look at them. Today I'm going to touch on stingless bees, and this is partly because we're having a workshop coming up next week, and so I felt this was the month and the best time to do so. So let's get right into it. Just by way of introduction, again, this is not meant to be a talk on stingless bees per se, but I'll just give a brief intro to the group. So these stingless bees belong to the tribe Meliponidae. Sometimes you'll see that written in the text, and people are wondering what Meliponidae is. It's just a tribe in terms of classification. We're not going to get into the details of classification for stingless bees. So sometimes you'll see stingless bees, you'll see stingless honeybees. Some persons would say native bees, even though native may not be quite as accurate because many bees are native. Or you'll just simply see them as Meliponidae. They are members of the Apidae. Apidae is a bigger family in which you have honeybees, of course, and others inside there. Of course, they are related to your other bees, carpenter bees, honeybees, bumblebees, and the rest. Of course, we don't have bumblebees here. So this is just a very generic definition for it. Of course, one of the key features for them is that they don't sting. It's not because they lack stingers, but of course the stingers are so reduced that for all intents and purposes, they are non-functional. That being said, they can bite. All bees can bite, but of course stingless bees utilize that as their main source of defense. So this is just information for those of you who are interested. For Trinidad and Tobago, we have about 8 to 9 species recorded. I've listed the ones here. This is based on work done by Starr and Hook back in 2003. I mean, this is certainly an underrepresentation. One of the things that we hope will come out of the BES-Net TT project is that we're going to be able to update this list, certainly include new ones on it. The suspicion is that there are many others that we're seeing, but of course, they're difficult really for most persons to identify. Just to point out in that list, some of the more common ones that people may see are the Melipona favosa, and of course, the Trigona alomatia. The photograph on the right, actually, which is not for the species we have here, is actually of a Paratomona species. Again, not the one that we believe we have here, but just a generic shot so you can get an idea of what these things look like. All right, so how do these stingless bees relate to plants? Well, of course, like most bees, they forage, and plants provide a good source of food. So in this case, stingless bees basically forage and collect resources during their everyday activities. The main two that I'll be concentrating on, because of course we're looking at the flowers, would be the nectar, which they need for their energy, and of course pollen, which they utilize for food, protein, and other nutritional needs. Of course, some of the other things that a bee would collect as they go about their foraging include things like water for cooling the hives and other processes inside of there, resins, which they use a lot to build their nests and to glue together holes, I should say, plug those holes so that nothing can come in, of course. Soil and sand particles also for nest building, and then, of course, twigs and plant materials for nest building. Those are just some of the general things that stingless bees will collect as they go about their daily routine. All right, so in terms of our plants, and there really are a number of plants when we start to dig into it. The plants that I'm going to present here today actually come out from our plant pollinator database exercise that we're doing. So far, roughly about 25 plant species are known within the tropics, and this is information gleaned from a study that's been done in Costa Rica. This is a long-running study that's been going on for a number of years now, and of course, we have plant families similar to them, similar to ones that they have, and of course some others, but 25 is a lot. 37 genera and 38 species were recorded there. We certainly have many of what they encountered and then some. So I encourage you to look at that reference sometimes. It's very useful. All right, so let's jump right into it. What I've decided to do is not only put in native ones, they're predominantly native, but I've also included some exotic ones, simply because they've been popping up so much, and some of them have literally become naturalized in Trinidad and Tobago, so they're quite common for all intents and purposes. I've chosen ones that are more roadside, ones that you find in your backyard. Some may not be as attractive as you think, but they certainly are the kind of things that stingless bees will go for. Now, this list is not exhaustive by any means. And it's not to say that stingless bees cannot visit many other flowers. Just to go back a bit, if you recall, and if not, you can check on the first webinar that we did. So bees in general are attracted to yellow, blue, and ultraviolet colors. I mean, that's the standard. They, of course, are visiting the flowers for pollen and other sources of sugars that they feed on. So most of the flowers that they will go to tend to be highly scented because bees have a strong sense of smell. And of course, you will often see they spoke about flowers that they can land on because, again, being very small, they need a surface that they can actually land on so that they can then start to collect nectar and pollen. So those are some of the general characteristics that you want to look for in flowers that would most likely attract your stingless bees. So what we have here is Amaranthus spinosus. This is Baji. Most of you all know it. Everybody has it growing in their backyard at some point in time, or you'll see it along the roadways and stuff. This one is native to us. Of course, we have other species of Amaranthus in Trinidad, about 3 or 4 more that are native, and of course, any number of exotic ones. they may not look as brightly colored and they might look tight, but these are actually interesting sources of pollen for stingless bees. All right, a pretty common plant, coconut. Everybody has a coconut tree around somewhere. Even though coconut is not introduced, it's not native, sorry, to Trinidad. It's basically naturalized now. But you will see a number of bees in general, and in particular stingless bees visiting coconut flowers. This, of course, is not exclusive to coconuts. Basically, any of the palms tend to be visited by a lot of pollinators, more so bees and insects. So a number of persons will see this one around. This is Cosmos caudatus. Now, Cosmos caudatus is our local variety of cosmos that we have. Of course, a number of persons would see the yellow one around and will think that that is also native, but that is actually Cosmos sulphurus, which is, again, quite common, but has been introduced here. Within the family Asteraceae, of course, but these plants tend to attract a lot of bees and insects in general, but stingless bees also congregate a lot to them. I should point out that a lot of these, like I said before, are relatively easy to grow. You'll find them growing in your backyard. And of course, the temptation is that you want to pull them out, but you want to leave these in place because these are the kind of things that your bees, and especially your stingless bees, would feed on. Certainly when the larger flowering trees are not in season as it is. So here's another Asteraceae. This is Tridax, Tridax procumbens, an exotic, but of course it's been here so long, it's for intents and purposes naturalized. And this again, you'll find along roadways. It's quite common, flowering basically throughout the year. Again, a nice source of food for stingless bees. I should pause here and say, so even within this family Asteraceae, this is your same family that has your marigold and your chrysanthemum and so on. These in general tend to be visited a lot by bees, and stingless bees included. All right, let's look at some from the big non-EAC. Tecoma stands, Tobago pui, which a lot of persons will see around. It's quite common. Persons like to plant it as an ornamental and so on. Very colorful, very showy, bright yellow flowers. Again, stingless bees love these. Goes into a shrub, almost a small tree sometimes, but you know, it's easy enough to maintain and quite beautiful when it's in full bloom. So here's an interesting one, a plant that you might not think bees would go to at all, but this is what people call physic nut. A bit toxic, but also one of the good medicinal plants to be used if you know exactly what you're doing with it. Jatropha gossipifolia, sorry. Again, a native for Trinidad and Tobago. Quite common. And again, if you ever go out and you have a look at it, you'll see a number of stingless bees targeting the flowers. Within the Leguminaceae, what used to be the Leguminaceae, now Fabaceae, which is a pretty large family in itself, quite a number of trees or flowers are visited by stingless bees. I've just extracted one or two. Caliandra, which is the powder puff plant, which we have in Trinidad and Tobago. We have two native species, C. krugeri and C. gildii. They both look the same for all intents and purposes, but the flowers are very bright, very showy. We have 4 exotic species, of course, which for all intents and purposes, the average person need not concern themselves with. The one in the photograph is one of the exotic ones, which we do have here, which is more commonly grown, but the others you'll see if you go out into the forest and stuff. Again, stingless bees gravitated. Now you might be wondering, I told you before that most times stingless bees gravitate to flowers that are blue and yellow. But here you have an exception where the flower is red. And again, so oftentimes you do have variations. It's not a hard and fast rule. Again, we're talking about generalities here, but stingless bees are recorded visiting Caliandra primarily as a source of pollen. Here's another interesting legume, quite common, unfortunately an exotic, but been utilized a lot on abandoned estates and so forth, and as a hedge plant. This is Gliricidia, Lauricida, as the common name is. Produces a very nice pink flower. And if you're very observant, especially in the mornings, you'll see a host of bees come into it. Very, very beautiful when it's flowering. And of course, stingless bees have been reported going to it mainly to collect nectar. This incidentally goes into a small tree, but of course it can be kept in a hedge-like state. For persons who are so inclined, makes for a very nice border plant if you have an estate, or perhaps you just want to block out the views or even stabilize a slope. So very nice, and serves a very nice function here with stingless bees. Here's a little one that often goes unnoticed. This is called Periodosis, sweet broom. That being said, we have about 2 or 3 other plants that are known as sweet broom, but this one is rather distinctive. Flowers are very small, and you could almost miss this in your garden. One of our natives, but again, if you're very observant, a lot of stingless bees congregate on it, not so much for the nectar, but of course for the pollen. Now here's a nice one. Unfortunately, it's an exotic, but quite common. Some parts of the world is considered an invasive. We don't have that designation for it here, but easily grown. This is coral vine, Antigonum leptopus. Very nice, very beautiful. Sometimes you'll see the wide variety as well as the pink one that you see here. Again, bees love this, and it's the sort of thing that flowers practically year round. I recall the farmer was asking, what sort of thing should I plant that would attract or that would be able to sustain? This is a nice one to put. Again, even though it's exotic, it's pretty good because it's very easy to grow. And of course, the flowering occurs at times when some of the larger trees are not likely to flower. This, of course, can be a good way to sustain a beehive. Keep them fed during those times when the trees are not as flowering as much. Just have a couple more to go through. Caprearia biflora. DTP, for those who know it, again, used as a medicinal plant to wash eyes and so forth. It's called goatweed in Tobago. Very small, very white flowers, but again, common plant which stingless bees have been known to frequent, and in particular, in this case, for nectar. The plant, as far as we know, flowers almost year round. I think that's my last one. There we are. All right, so again, I've only presented a few. There are lots more to put, but I've selected some of the ones that are more likely to be seen in your garden, growing natural and wild if you leave it as such. We'll continue this next time around, and I'll also want to touch on some of the ones for bees in general, in particular, some of the orchids, some of the native orchids for the orchid species. Then we'll touch on butterflies, and then we'll get into birds. For those of you who like to do some reading, Duncan's book is a good guide, Kenny's Flower of Trinidad and Tobago, and of course that reference I gave you earlier with the study that was done in Costa Rica. It's an ongoing study. Very detailed publication. It's probably one of the best we have for this region, outside of stuff done in Venezuela. It's written in English, but of course it's very good. Right, I think that's it. And I'll wrap up there. I think I'm within time. I'll answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane. That was a great presentation. I am looking to see if anybody has any questions. I'm not seeing any in the Q&A. I am also not seeing anybody in the chat. If anybody has anything, now would be the time. Everything very clear? Okay, so as Shane mentioned, next up for his series will be more about the stingless bees and more about bees in general. Our next webinar will also be about stingless bee biology, which will be following our physical workshop about an introduction to stingless bees. and Stingless Beekeeping, which will happen at the end of this month at Wasamaki. So if you have registered, then we will see you guys there. I'm just going to give you an opportunity, another minute or two, for any kind of questions or comments that you may have. Yes, okay. So Celeste also reminded me you can contact the project team at BES-Net TT@gmail.com. And as usual, you can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We also have our YouTube channel where we're posting these webinars, so you can look at them again. And we also now have a TikTok channel, so you can check us out there as well. I'm seeing something in the Q&A. Okay. Thank you very much, Anisha, saying very informative presentations. Great. So if nobody has any questions, I would end this webinar here today. If you do think of something afterwards and you want some clarification, anything, feel free to email us or contact us via any of the social media channels. Otherwise, you know where to find us. So thanks again for being here today. And thank you very much to Celeste and Shane, who as usual did an awesome job at presenting their topics. And we will see you guys soon.